Good morning, friends. Wonderful to see you early morning. A warm welcome on a cool morning, I would say. It's some of the good months of Ahmedabad and one of the best of the summit. And Sanjay Bhai, first of all, thanks to you. Sanjay Bhai is our PR chairman, and Professor Alan D'Souza, guest speakers who are coming throughout the day, ladies and gentlemen, and a lot of students I can see also, and many of them still walking in. So this morning we have gathered for something which is a lot of knowledge throughout the day. We're going to be having six sessions including five plenary, where we would be talking lot of knowledge, lot of brand, personal brand, advertising, and this is something which certainly we are all quite interested in, as we know, because every day these brands are something that hammer on us and that makes our lifestyle also, as we look at. Professor Alan D'Souza is with us, and nobody better than our selection for the keynote address that he will be delivering. But before that, I would like to give you a little bit about what the brand summit is. Guys, you can walk in sooner, faster. So here, the purpose of this event, and certainly we have a diverse group. We have professionals, we have students, we have people from industry, and we have branding professionals that we are having in the room today. And the purpose of discussion is the branding and the what next. There's a theme today that we are taking also, that managing a brand, and then we have professor who is going to talk about what's next. And then there was an advertisement, professor, if I remember, Samsung on somebody, next is what. So next is what probably. Yes. So that's something that which we are very keen to today to have. Certainly there are a lot of changes that we can see. That digital has become all of a sudden, so much in place, and then the advertising, branding. And then the branding is not about just the FMCG. We can see branding, IPL teams, even the country teams, the branding that is happening, even individuals. Today we have a session, one of the RJs coming and talk about personal branding and institution. I would say if we look at it, an AMA branding, if we invite Professor Alan D'Souza, kind of we are branding AMA also. Alan D'Souza, professor, is a brand by himself. Maybe if I was his student, I would say I'm a brand because I was a student of Professor Alan D'Souza. So there's a brand in a brand that I would think, and Professor, you can probably throw some light on that also, that there are institutions which are built. And Professor, I always say, try to understand one thing, and that whether it is the umbrella brand which is more important or the brand below. Right? There would be a Toyota and there would be a Corolla. There would be a Mica and there would be a Professor Alan D'Souza. So, and Professor Alan D'Souza's or the Corollas make the Toyota, but then Toyota is the umbrella. So that's also a fun that we have to try to understand what is important, what drives what, and ultimately where is the branding and where is the branding in terms of the positioning that do. The important part is certainly the positioning, and I was listening to one of the advertisements these days on the morning Vivid Bharati 96.7 FM, and this Vico Vajradanti toothpaste says that उसमें जाग का मजा नहीं मिलेगा, उसमें स्वाद का मजा नहीं मिलेगा, तो क्या मिलेगा? Milega asar. So the positioning, the focus on what I am delivering and trying to, without using the competition, saying that I am talking about asar. And the ladies goes on say, ये थोड़ा picture का ticket थोड़ा है, ये तो toothpaste है. So this is also something when we say that how the brands are hammering and creating, they make us start thinking about how the brand focus, positioning, USP that they are driving. So certainly very excited that I am, and we are all. We have several speakers coming in during the session. We have people from the industry who have built large brands, people who are building brands, who are the background of the association where the advertising standards are. We have, as I said, personal brand people. We have some pure FMCG and the brands that are coming up. And certainly we have Professor Alan D'Souza. I would introduce Professor Alan D'Souza. Sir, I know people are more eager to listen to you than me. And Professor, he is, of course, a founder member of MICA, as we all know him for so many years, a reputed institution, institutional builder that he is, and he is one of the most influential names in the communication, and so is MICA. Professor is an author, researcher, a coach. He is a consultant for brand and marketing communications. He is instrumental in building institutions of communication management as former executive director of Mudra Communication, former president of IIMA Alumni Association, Ahmedabad chapter, and founder member of Mudra Institute of the MICA, as we know, Communication, Ahmedabad. He is the founder dean of MICOR and a former director Goa Institute of Management, former dean of Shanti Business School and Shanti Communication School. So I know when he speaks, one thing that we are listening a lot in the today's this news, this advertisement world is "Fark nazar aayega." So we have him. There's a Wonder Cement ad that our Big B that he says that "Fark nazar aayega." Sir, we want to have you and we want to listen to you. We are very eager to listen to you. But before that, I would certainly do honors as a token of appreciation and our love.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I think I should thank Dr. Godiawala for that very loving and kind introduction. I also wish to thank my good friend Unmesh, Executive Director, and another good friend who's sitting there in the corner called Sanjay. Now, if it was not for Sanjay's arm twisting, I would not be here today. Because I have got another very important program happening at MICA, which I was supposed to attend, but I managed to reschedule things and come and said that once I've made a commitment, I should be here and try to do the best I can. So when Sanjay asked me, what would you like your title of your talk to be? So I thought for a little while. And you know, I've been associated with Brand Summit for many years now, and indeed with AMA for even more years. So I thought to myself, if we are talking about brands, with all the stuff that is happening in the world today, let's take a title called Brands, What Next? Because I think that we are on the cusp of something absolutely phenomenal, which I think the world is grappling with today. We really don't know how the future is going to hold, but we know that the world is changing. And the world has been changing since the onset of the internet. The internet has changed the way we do things, the way we communicate, the way we socialize. And I'm glad to see that there is a large proportion of Gen Z over here who are, or call them, maybe there are some millennials here, and now even Gen Alpha is becoming extinct. So, you know, the world is changing in terms of the sheer way human population is moving. So the world is getting younger and younger. It's become a world of the young. And the young are now dominating the way things are going. If you reflect a little bit on another aspect of business, and if you see which of the businesses were big in yesteryear, you will see that these businesses were heritage businesses. They were businesses that had a different way of starting, different way of looking at the world, different way of looking at the market, different way of looking at consumers. But technology has changed all that. If you read my book, which has been released called Brand Magic, you will see I've covered most of the brands of Gujarat which I have been associated with. And you see that, the stories of those brands are of a particular kind. Today's brands are very different. Whether you take Amazon, whether you take Swiggy, whether you take Make My Trip, all these brands have grown very fast, very quickly. So these are all technology driven brands which have been driven on the back of the internet. So what does this tell us? What does this new era tells us? This new era tells us that something is definitely happening which we have not seen before. For maybe the last 100 years, we've seen it in the last 10 to 15 years. And the world is changing very, very fast. In fact, the next big leap is something we can't even imagine what is going to happen. And that is driven by artificial intelligence. Now, if you take a look at AI and what AI is not new. I mean, we have had robotics for at least a decade. But the way AI is changing today is completely different, and it is revolutionizing the world. In fact, some thinkers like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, etc., are wondering what kind of an animal we are creating through artificial intelligence. And from a consumer and a student and a maybe learning standpoint, products like ChatGPT have accelerated the entire process. So we are in a flux today. We are at a cusp of something so different we can't even imagine. And in fact, the world also can't even imagine. I'm currently doing a global project. My focus has always been brands. My focus has always been integrated marketing communications. So 4 researchers got together, and they are all my personal friends. The first researcher is Dr. Preeti Shroff. She was the Dean of MICA. She is currently Executive Director at Northwestern Medill School of Communication and Journalism. She's a good friend. She and I are working on this project. It's a global project. She's based in the US. I've got another researcher, Dr. Altaf, who's the dean of one of the schools in the US again, who's a great researcher and who is helping us handle the research part of it. The next researcher is a gentleman called Dr. Siddharth Deshmukh, who's based in London. He's handling our Europe part of the exercise, and I'm handling the India part of the exercise, India and Asia part of the exercise. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to understand what brands and what branding is going to be like in the next few years. And I think what I have written in my book that you will find outside displayed is already becoming a little obsolete. And in fact, we are upgrading some of those material. Because those very brands, whether you take Amul, whether you take Rasna, whether you take Havmor, whether you take Astral, whether you take any of those brands that I have written about, you will see that those brands are grappling with the future, as indeed thousands and hundreds of brands across the world. So we are mounting this study to find out what is it that is going to change in the world as a result of this new technology that is going to come about. Of course, we know how consumers are changing based on existing technology. For example, we have research to show that Gen Z globally spends about 7 to 8 hours on social media every day. And therefore, it's either Insta, or it's Facebook, or it's, if you are a professional, it's LinkedIn. So these are the things, and things are changing because everything has now converged into one small screen called a mobile, where you're getting everything online at the time you want it, the way you want it, and whatever you want. So you don't have to go anywhere and search for things and stuff. You get it customized. And today, algorithms are created which serve you stuff that you want. In fact, the scary part is they will serve you what you want only if they know who you are, what is your behavior, what you do, what you read, what you eat, what you shop. They know everything. Data science has become a huge thing, and data analytics has become a huge thing. Earlier, we used to crunch data in 30, 40 years ago when I was just starting my career. We used to crunch data manually. Now you don't need to crunch that. Now huge piles of data collect automatically from various sources, as a result of which you are able to serve that community in a much better way by analyzing that data. And therefore, data analytics has become a huge thing in marketing today. Everybody is collecting data. So there are side effects like privacy of data. Everybody comes to know about who I am and what will they use it in a malified way and so on and so forth. Those concerns are always there and will continue to be there in time to come. But that is for the regulators and the regulatory mechanism to figure out what to do. But we as marketeers, as brand entrepreneurs, if I might say, what do we do? What should be our concerns? Where do we go from here? So this new animal is something that we need to grapple with. And that's why the topic of my subject is brands, what next? Now, I've been working with brands all my life. And branding and marketing communications is very close to my heart. So I have been asking myself this question: what will fundamentally change when we talk about brands of the future? And my belief is that the brand as a concept will not change. The way we address that concept will change. So branding, for example, is all about perception, as we know. The famous saying, a product is made in the factory, a brand is created in the consumer's mind. That will not change. That will still be the prerogative of the customer to choose what he or she wants based on the slot or the positioning, as Dr. Godiawala has mentioned, in the consumer's mind. That will not change. What will change is how we will fashion our communication. Because brands are a derivative of communication. There's no way you can create a brand unless you have great communication and targeted communication. So great communication means that you have to create marketing communications of various kinds. And that's what we in advertising, marketing communications, PR, or whatever marketing communications setup we work for, we've been trying to do. We try to create communications that endear a brand to a consumer. So I don't think that is going to change. That will continue to be important. So most of you are marketing and communication students. You know that the first thing that you start with in a branding exercise is to understand what is the purpose of the brand. What is the soul of the brand? Why are we here? Why are we existing? And maybe in Devki's session, she will again talk to you about a personal brand, and you will ask the same question, Ki, bhai, why am I here? What's my purpose in life? What's my goal in life? Why am I here in this journey? मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ, क्या कर रही हूँ? So these kind of questions are asked of any brands, and I believe that human beings are as much brands as anybody else. As he mentioned, he considered me a brand, but okay, whatever it is, all of us are brands. I mean, let's have that clear in our minds. So if that's the case, we have to first sit down and ask, what is the purpose of a brand? What is the vision of a brand? And this is what drives most brands. So let us take the case of Amul, which is there in my book. What was the purpose of that brand? What was the reason why Dr. Kurian created a brand called Amul? And I have had the good fortune with working with Dr. Kurian very closely. when I did some work for Amul through Mudra, and I also launched his brand called Dhara in India. So Dr. Kurian's purpose, the first thing when I met him in Anand, he said, you know, Mr. D'Souza, I want you to create a brand which will appeal to millions and millions of Indians. And that time I was launching Dhara. So he said, you create a brand like Amul, which is now the favorite of millions of Indians in the country. So create a brand like that. And let it be an Indian brand. Let it be a brand that captures the heart of Indians, like Amul did. So we said, okay. So what was the purpose of Dr. Kurian to create a brand like Dhara or like Amul? It was to serve the millions of consumers in India in a very effective and a very ethical way. And that has been the principle of Amul right from the beginning. Now I can go into the Amul story. It's a big story. I can't go through it now. It's there in my book in case you're interested to read it. But the fact remains that his purpose in life, forget about the brand, his purpose in life was to serve the farmers of India. And he liked to call himself the milkman of India. So he was India's Dudwala, the biggest Dudwala going. Today, Amul is about 70,000 crores in terms of turnover. So because I had the good fortune of working with Dr. Kurian, I knew the inside story of Amul. I knew what was the ethos, what was the purpose of Amul. And therefore, when you know the purpose of a brand, you are better able to create effective communication for that brand. The late Dr. Kurian's daughter recently asked me to do a piece for a coffee table book that has been published in honor of Dr. Kurian. It's called The Milkman of India. Several people have contributed, like Adi Godrej and most of the industrialists of India. And I was asked, and Shyam Benegal was there. He made a film, as you know, Manthan, with Dr. Kurian, which talks about the entire milk movement. So I was asked to write a piece because I launched Dhara for him. So he said, why don't you write your impressions about Dr. Kurian? So I did, and you'll find that in the book, the coffee table book, which is available maybe somewhere. But the point is that whatever you do in life, you have to have a purpose, and Dr. Kurian certainly had a purpose. And I have always been saying to everybody that one of the greatest things that has ever happened to me in my life is to have to work with a chap like Dr. Kurian. But that's apart. I liked him because also, as a branding professional, he gave me a lot of freedom to create whatever kind of advertising and marketing communications that I wanted. But that is incidental. So first is the purpose of a brand, and that's not going to change. So every brand needs to have a purpose. You take any of the 10 brands that I have written in my book, whether it is a symphony. Achal Bakeri came many years ago to us with an idea, and we translated that into a brand called Symphony. So you start off with an idea, you start with a vision, you start with a purpose. So that's the first fundamental principle in branding. Once you have arrived at that, you have to figure out whether that purpose has a meaning in the market. If you have a great purpose, but nobody wants that product or the brand that you are creating, then what's the point? It won't sell, irrespective of what you do. So you have to take a look at consumers. Consumers are very, very important in any branding and marketing strategy. And if you understand consumers, you can be sure that you will create some very, very desirable and convincing advertising. And that's the difficult part. It's very difficult to understand consumers because consumers are not static. Consumers change all the time. Consumers' needs change, consumers' preferences change, consumers' likes, dislikes change, everything changes about. So it's a moving target which you have to try and shoot at every time and get every time the shot right. That's a very difficult job in consumer and marketing and in branding. But those who have been able to do that, the big dads of branding and the big dads of marketing, all the big brands have been able to understand their consumers and develop communication that convinces those consumers to buy their brands. So having understood consumers, and I'll come to the current context a little later, in terms of given the new changing world, what are the things that we need to look at? So I'm going a little back in time because just to give you a context, how the old world operated, all those brands that are big today, how they operated and what are the challenges that they are facing. In fact, that's part of my research. When I talk to these big brands, they're saying, we are trying to figure out now how to handle this new animal that is coming in the market. How do we handle Chat GPT? How do we use it? I mean, we must understand all these technologies is a double-edged sword. It can cut both ways. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. As indeed we have seen it happening in cybercrime today, for example. So technologies cut both ways. But the fact is that we as good people, good human beings, good marketers, good businessmen, we want to use technology for good, not for bad. And therefore we need to understand how to use that technology for the good. And that's what our challenge in branding is all about. So having understood the purpose, having understood the consumers, and today no longer you can design consumers in terms of demographics, psychographics, Sec A, Sec B, Sec. No, it doesn't work that way anymore. You have a moving target which is very different thanks to technology, and I'll come to that a little later. But the fact is that having understood the purpose, having understood the consumer, you next have to craft desirable communication to meet those needs, and that's where the creative part comes. Now, when we used to create advertising, whether it was for Dhara, whether it was for Vimal, whether it was in Mudra, we had a team that did all that creative work. That creative work was done by visualizers, copywriters, and so on and so forth. And earlier they would do pencil work, then they went into drawings, and then they went into computer stuff, then they went into digital graphics, and so on and so forth. Well, now that is even changing. And we'll see how AI is going to affect that, how AI, ChatGPT, design, how these are going to get affected from the old ways of creativity. And the question before most people in advertising and marketing and branding now is, will this artificial stuff kill creativity rather than enhance it? And that's the biggest challenge that most people in the creative agencies today are facing. Creative directors are wondering कि अरे ad यदि हम नहीं बनाएंगे और हमारा artificial intelligence का कोई some creature there will create advertising, then what happens to us? So there is this big fear, not only in advertising, marketing, communication, but in every sphere of life. In fact, that's what people are worrying, that artificial intelligence may at someday replace human beings in most of the jobs that we do. Then what happens? You take, for example, healthcare. Today, AI is used in healthcare to such an extent that thanks to robotics, surgeries can be produced without human intervention. So if that happens, so doctors ka kya hoga? Surgeons ka kya hoga? So there is a huge challenge all over the place. I'm not going to go into that. I'm just trying to say that trying to focus in terms of our own little subject of branding and communication, what is the kind of impact and what are the things that we need to see? So coming to the next aspect, apart from creativity, now creativity has to be given some place to perform. And that place to perform is what we call a platform. Earlier it used to be called media, now we call it platform. So in media we have various sources, we have print, we have television, we have radio, we have out of home and so on and so forth. Those were the media that we used to play with earlier. Not any longer. That's no longer the prime media. At one point of time, print was dominant. Print occupied the major market share. Then came television, started rapidly replacing print. And all the others were small players anyway, radio, out of home, were small players. So print and television have been running neck to neck for a long time. Then comes another animal created through the internet. So people now don't want to watch so much on television, or even if they watch on television, you'll find that programs on Sky, Tata Sky, is that are watched is much less than programs on OTT platforms. So you see Netflix, Amazon Prime, Sony, and so on and so forth. Other platforms are getting a lot more variety of programs. And look at it from a consumer point of view. What is the consumer saying? पहले तो एक ही चैनल मिलता था, दूरदर्शन था 1940s 50s में. उसके बाद we got satellite TV, फिर Z आ गई, and we got a few other channels coming in. But now that whole scenario has changed. Now you can pick and choose what you want. And the beauty is that thanks to algorithms that have been created which understand you, when you press the like button on Netflix, I like it very much, or I don't like it, this is not my kind, or whatever, it's actually capturing data of your viewing habits and throwing you programs or movies or serials which you are likely to love, because that is what you've said. So they analyze the content of the programs, they find out what is your need, and they give you programs, they serve you programs accordingly. So that is the beauty of the new era, where you're getting stuff that you want, the way you want it, when you want it. Now take a look at news, for example. Who's reading the newspaper anyway these days? I mean, I read the newspaper because I've been born on the newspaper. If I don't get my newspaper, I can't enjoy my morning cup of coffee or tea. But today's kids, my children, newspapers is for dad. Maybe for mom, if she wants to see something. But certainly not for the kids. If they ever are interested in news, they go online. And now if you don't want to watch, if you are interested in a particular kind of news, you can get it in InShots. You can get the news the way you want it. I want only sports news, or I want only fashion news, or I want only a particular political news. So what is the name of the game now? The name of the game is super customization. Ki bhai, I have to deliver what this individual wants. And not only a single individual, but a mass of single individuals. And how do I communicate to all these individuals? Earlier, हमने एक ad बना दिया, television पर डाल दिया, काम खत्म हो गई. Now I have to customize depending upon different segments. And what is our research? We are doing another research which has found out that the Gen Z have different personalities on different media. So the way you approach Insta, for example, is very different from the way you approach Facebook. You are a different person altogether. You are a different avatar, if you may call it that, when you watch different programs. So the challenge for marketing and branding experts is very, very difficult of how do I customize communication that is appealing to many people who change their colors so often. So this is the next challenge. The final challenge is the question of platform. I've done my consumer survey. I know I've got the vision of my product clear. I know what I want to do. I know how to fashion the product. How do I decide which platform I must use? What do I use? Do I use Google Ads? Do I use television? Do I use out of home? Do I use a combination of all these? How much do I put in each? Where do I put it? What should be the scheduling? All these are millions and millions of questions that are becoming even more complicated than it ever was. But thanks to technology, you can now do everything through the use of algorithms. So you don't have to do things yourself. The algorithm will throw up exactly what you need to do, and you can deliver your advertising or marketing communications. So these are the various changes that are happening today in the world. Purpose needs to be well defined. Consumers need to be understood, and we need to understand which platforms to deliver. So I have developed a model now which we are globally testing through this research, and it looks at three basic parameters. It is called purpose, persona, and platform. So these are the three pillars on which all future communications are going to be built. Future communications is going to be understanding your purpose, which has to be aligned. Now, when you talk about purpose also, there is a huge problem there. one of the studies that I did in integrated marketing communications was that everybody knew what IMC was. Yeah, IMC means सब कुछ एक बक्से में डालो and use it effectively. कुछ ना कुछ निकलेगा उसमें से. IMC is a use of various tools. So everybody was talking about IMC, but when I did my research, I went to many companies and I asked them, how do you use IMC? Is there any way by which you decide on what tool to use in what proportion? How much do you spend on advertising? How much do you spend on social media? How much would you spend on out of home? I found out to my dismay that there were, maybe not to my dismay, I found out that the realistic situation was that most people did it based on past data or what they felt was needed to be done. And some cases जुगाड़ भी लगा दिया कि भाई यहाँ डालो तो कुछ हो जाएगा kind of stuff. So that kind of scenario prevails in India, it even does today. And when I asked them, how do you measure the effectiveness of your marketing, communication, branding process? उसे अरे एक ही तो ये है सेल्स है सेल्स ऊपर गया तो चल रहा है सेल्स नीचे गया तो नहीं चल रहा है it doesn't work that simply because marketing is a fundamental principle that runs on many engines. So you may have a great promotion but you have a lousy product, it doesn't work. You have a great promotion but you have wrong pricing, it won't work. If you have a great promotion but your product is not available, it's not distributed well, it won't work. So there are multiple challenges in creating a brand. Not just the promotion P part of it, but it's a complex mix of all these various P's and how do you function. So these are, I think, the challenges of the future. And I think that's where AI and the current technologies make it even more complicated. I was at a seminar at IIM Ahmedabad, since I'm a student from there, I go for all their programs. And in one program, a very interesting gentleman who's doing seminal work in AI and its connect with design gave us a demonstration. He does work for the government of India and he does a lot of work for public sector and so on, and also the private sector. So he said there is a lot of things that AI can do in design and it's connect with design thinking. Now how does ChatGPT or any of this work? Basically what is done is, it is data collection on one side, it is a prompt on the other side that you give, and it's an output that you get on the third side. So he said, let's look at this. You want an ad that has to have a picture of an elephant walking on a railway station. Now in the old days, if we got an idea like that, we had to actually go hunt for an elephant. We had to go to a railway station, get n number of permissions, take the entire crew and the team there of about 100 people, shoo everybody out of the place, try to shoot in that place and get the right shot, like typical film shooting happens. So इसने क्या किया? He said, he gave a prompt. What the computer or the algorithm did is, it took all the data that it had of elephants and railway stations, tried different variations, permutations, combinations, and the perfection of the picture that you get is dependent on the prompt that you give. So today I just learned from a delegate from Singapore who came for our conference at MICA. He was telling me कि भाई आजकल क्या हो रहा है ना, in advanced country they are developing courses called prompt engineering. Now, how do you engineer prompts? How do you develop good prompts so that the AI gives you the best result? Now this is another level of thinking altogether. So, the multiple dimension ways that things are going. So finally, let me come to this elephant story. So this guy did the job and then up came a picture on the screen of a relatively decent elephant walking on a station, which would have taken us maybe 3 weeks with lakhs of rupees spent. This guy did it in 10 minutes with the use of his software. Now this is what is happening in design. So these are incredible things that are happening in the world today in terms of marketing, communications, and branding. Now these are challenges that are there today for companies that are big and want to know how to use this. So I have been thinking about some of the brands that I have written about. And I've gone to some of the MDs of those companies and I've talked to them. And they are now ready to be part of my research study. Because they say, "Aap humko bata do kya karna chahiye." How do I make my brand relevant to my target audience? Let me take, for example, ice cream. Now, we are all very fond of ice cream. Gujarat is one of the largest consumers of ice cream throughout the year. And you got some great brands over here like Amul, Vadilal, have more, and I've had the opportunity of working with most of them. So ice cream le lo. Abhi now, what are you selling when you're selling ice cream? You're not just selling an ice cream as a product. I mean, gone are the days when you're selling a product, you're selling an idea, you're selling a thought, you're selling a satisfaction. So ice cream is basically joy, or whatever you call it, a slice of life which gives you a feeling of happiness and so on and so forth. So most of the ice cream manufacturers have worked on this theme. Now earlier, ice cream was seen as a family product. कि भाई आइसक्रीम कब आता था, when घर में आता थे या kids were given ice cream. Earlier kids used to ask for ice cream. Even when they were in school and college, माँ बाप को पूछते थे कि भाई आइसक्रीम खाना है. But today kids have got enough money to buy their parents ice cream also. So what they do is they take the ice cream and they go and the needs of Gen Z children is very different from what the needs of parents are. The parents get a different kind of pleasure through an ice cream, which Gen Z gets a different pleasure. So the Gen Z's way of looking at an ice cream is very different from the way of a Gen X or Gen Y. So this is what marketeers and brand marketeers need to understand in future. How are you going to figure out what the target segment is going to like? So therefore, what you see today is, earlier we used to use traditional media for our advertising. Today, a lot more Gen Z people want social media. So you have to be present on social media. वो तो TV देखते नहीं. They hardly read print. Outdoor तो ठीक है, is still relevant because रास्ते पर तो चलना पड़ता है. So you'll find still a lot of advertising happening, but a lot of the thing is moving into social media in terms of advertising and marketing communications. So you see that this is a very, very complex phenomenon, and I think I've run out of time, sir. मेरा time तो खत्म हो गया, because in case there are questions, I have been given 15 minutes. But I will quickly wrap up in another 3 to 4 minutes by saying that, this whole thing of branding is becoming more and more complicated. And if you guys are thinking of going into marketing and branding, you better be aware of what this whole subject is all about. I took 50 years in this age. I'm completing 50 years of working in branding and marketing. I passed out in 1974. Most of you were not born at that age. I still feel I don't know much about branding. I still feel things because this changes constantly. And now even more. And you'll be surprised at my age, I'm studying stuff like AI and ChatGPT and all. But the way I do it, I work with people who are younger than me by at least 30, 40 years. So they inject me with some ideas, I give them the maturity of my ideas, and we enmesh it into making it something interesting. So the bottom line story that I wanted to tell you is that brands next is a very, very different phenomenon. And as someone said, if you think that internet was big, wait till you see what AI can do. Thank you very much.
We can take some questions.
Yeah, sure.
We can take some questions. Any questions? You can be comfortable to be
I'll stand, no problem.
Hi sir, I'm Pratik. I run a company who works with the global agencies, and my question to you is twofold. One is, what is the importance of a brand if you are into B2B2C segment? And again, I want to just request on elaboration of your point, where how do you measure an effectiveness of an expense on the integrated marketing communication, as you rightly touched that point, but I want to just elaborate, like, how do you measure the effectiveness, or how do you measure the ROI of integrated marketing communication when it is, when the, as you say, you know, an individual has a several moods, and at each mood you need a different communication or different. So I just want to request for that part. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the question that you have asked, I teach in my IMC class and take about 60 minutes to answer. And I also give them the benefit of my book, which I have written, which is a textbook on advertising and promotions. And there's an entire chapter on how do you measure effectiveness of IMC. But suffice it to say that when you measure IMC or any IMC tool, first of all, what you have to be clear about is what is your objective that you want to get. And that objective never should be in terms of sales. It should be in terms of the advertising or marketing parameters, which is awareness, interest, desire, and action. These are what we typically call the IDA model. Now you have to measure, you have to put metrics there. So if you have awareness levels, so you have to measure, this is all done through consumer research, okay? So if you measure these parameters, you define your parameters, what is your awareness level as of now, where do you want to go, and you can measure it. So this is possible to measure all the tools that you use. There are some that are easier to measure. Like for example, you know exactly in print what kind of readership you can get through your media campaign. You can get to know through television what is the kind of TRPs you're getting across genres and so on and so forth. So it's possible to get a lot of data, put it together and measure your effectiveness. I mean, 2 घंटे का lecture मैंने 2 minutes में डाल दिया, ठीक है? But anyway, that's possible to do that. Now, as far as B2B and B2C is concerned, you see, B2C, I think, my opinion, is far more challenging than B2B. And the parameters by which B2C is marketed and branded is very different from the way B2B is. Because B2B concerns are different. It depends on product to product. B2C concerns are different. And B2C, the outlays are far greater in terms of money to be spent. Because you know, you're talking about millions of consumers, whereas B2B, you're talking about maybe 100, 200 consumers. It's a very limited group. And you can target focus. The tools that you use from IMC are very, very different. But to answer both your questions, first of all, it's possible to measure the IMC. You can do it. Professional agencies do it. And as far as B2B versus B2C is concerned, both are required and both have very different ways of approaching the subject.
Good morning, sir. I am Dr. Krunal. We know and we understand that you cannot build a strong brand unless and until you have a strong product. But we have also seen a lot of examples where the product is so strong and it has got built into a very strong brand without much of communication. And if we talk of certain such examples like RP Goenka, the toffee, I forgot the name, but the tangy flavored toffee, it built into almost 300 or 500 crore brand without marketing communication. And then much later into its launch life, or 3 years later, they started ads, right? So how do you look at this? Or these are just one-off cases, sir?
See, I think there are exceptions to the rule. There are exceptions to the rule. There's no doubt it's not one paintbrush applies everywhere. You take the case of Balaji Wafers, which I have written in my book. You will see that Balaji Wafers became a big brand without advertising for the first few years. They just created a great product. It's a very interesting story if you read it in the book, the way the brand grew. They grew the brand very fast, but then they found that they reached a kind of a summit and they couldn't climb. That's when they saw the need for kickstarting it with advertising. The good news is that by the time the brand reached a certain threshold level, it also had the resources to put into advertising. So they were able to plow in money and put in, because advertising is expensive business, you know, unless you do advertising in a proper way. And very often clients who have come to me, with small budgets saying, "Saab, kuch karo ek paise ke saath." I said, put your money in the bank and get some 8 or 9% interest rather than spend it on advertising, because this is going to go waste. So there is this thing called optimal amount of advertising also that you need to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that you keep throwing money at advertising and hope it works. As it has been said, in advertising, about 50% of it does something and 50% doesn't do anything. And you don't know which 50% is working. That's the challenge. But jokes apart, I think the fact is that advertising works. I've done n number of case studies where advertising and marketing communication works. So if you want your brand to become big, and if you have the money and the wherewithal, do employ marketing communication. There are other ways of doing it. Today, for example, WOM has become big, WOM is word of mouth. Word of mouth is so powerful today that you don't need to advertise in some cases. For example, things when they go viral, you can create big brands and you can kill big brands through viral communication. So, there are various things that are happening today that are very complicated. But the fundamental principle is people must know who you are, what you stand for, in the right way and in a powerful way. They must know. And once they know that, of course, the problem with advertising is, and in today's context, is this whole question about fakes. Today so much of it, because there is democratization of the media, there is no curated media. By at least when you read Times of India, the editor, everybody were educated people. आज कोई भी कुछ भी डाल सकता है and make it viral. WhatsApp पे डालता है, fake news goes on viral. So the challenge is, how do you know what is right and what is wrong? Curated media is the challenge of tomorrow. Okay. If there are no more questions for this.
So the question I have, that when you're in a startup, I mean, that's okay, I'm a teacher by profession, principal, so. I hope everybody is able to hear that. Yeah, so in a startup where you have never been into the business, but now you all of a sudden decide to turn an entrepreneur, how long should you wait for the feedback of platform, persona, product, whether you are in the right direction or something has to be changed, whether it's pricing or whether it's product or it's platform? So what should be that period for understanding if it's not working out, for example, in a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, what should be that period? That was.
See, as far as startups is concerned, I have a different take on this business. I believe that out of every 10 startups that come out, 9 fail. 1 goes through, okay? The reason why I think startups, many people feel that, chalo, ye idea acha hai, isko execute karenge, kuch karenge. But then they never test out things properly. That's the problem. You have to do your research in such a way that you are reasonably sure that there is a market for this product. Now, you might have an idea. The other day I was at this startup summit at IIM Ahmedabad, where we were listening to Deep Kalra, the founder of Make My Trip. Make My Trip founder, it was a startup conference of all IIM graduates who have started startups, and Deep Kalra is one of them. He's from IIM Ahmedabad. Bikchandani, Naukri.com is another IIM Ahmedabad. So we've got about 300 startups in the market today. People from IIM Ahmedabad who have started it. Now all these startups, you should hear the story of Deep Kalra. He almost gave up. Things were so wrong at some stage. He lost a lot of money. He didn't have money to pay his employees. He had a huge amount of problems. These are startup problems. And one thing that I learned from him was, see, startup is not a small-time game. It's not a short-term game. It's a long-term game. You have to be there for the long run. Of course, money is always a problem with startups. That's why you have these venture capitalists pouring in money, because they have faith in the idea and they have faith in the entrepreneur. So they pour in money, and then some people succeed, some don't succeed. When they succeed, they give in huge returns to the people who have put in money as shareholders or whatever. But that doesn't answer your question. Your question is, how do you get things right from a branding perspective right from the beginning? It's very difficult. This entire game is about building a game plan that is likely to succeed. See, nothing works without planning. Yeah. Even in the old world, whether you're starting, you think Rasna succeeded? When Rasna came to us, when I was in Mudra, Rasna came to us as a brand called Jaffe. It failed completely. Then the Kambatas came to us and said, "Can you do something?" We rebranded the whole thing. We did the new name. We gave it Rasna. We did a research in those days unheard of amongst all consumers and found out what exactly was the drinking habits, was there the positioning. Then we created the advertising strategy and all that. So it's a painstaking process, irrespective of which sector you're coming from, and that you can never do a shortcut of. The better you get an understanding of the market and various factors that go into marketing, the better are your chances of success. But you know, I always tell marketing and branding students who study with me, I tell them this is a game of chance. You will win, you will not win. Sometimes you'll win, sometimes you'll not win. And we often talk about the 4 Ps, you know. Very often I ask students, what are the 4 Ps? 4 Ps is product, price, placement, promotion. Ho gayi baat. Nobody goes to understand that it is the optimization of the 4 Ps, that getting the 4 Ps right every time you market a product is the challenge, and that's very difficult. Those who have succeeded have got all these Ps right in the right proportion at the right time in the right way, and that's why they succeed. Okay? Chalo, I think we should call it a day.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly, I think very insightful, without a doubt. I don't want to repeat anything, but certainly super specialization is where now we are heading towards. An elephant on the railway station is something which becomes a reality that for a consumer, as if that's happening live. So once again, thank you. And we, of course, are having multiple sessions during the day. We'll have a tea break right now, and so we go to Adani Pavilion for the tea break, and we report here 11:25 sharp. Thank you. And please make sure that we get the feedback from you for the session. Thank you. Thank you, sir, once again. Thank you. And thank you, Sanjay Bhai, for putting the whole thing together once again.